moving on to our next, right? Here's another one where the government believes that they're helping, right? And we're talking about humanitarian aid into Gaza. So if people didn't see this, this happened just a few days ago, and what it was a cargo delivery system parachute drop of 38,000 meals, right? So it's about 10 or 12 pallets kicked out of the back of a cargo plane on parachutes into Gaza. All right. I have been on the receiving end of these kinds of operations as resupply. And let me tell you what happens. A cargo plane flies over, there's 10 or 12 pallets, right? So if you've got 10 pallets and there's 38,000 MREs, there's 3,800 per pallet because the Air Force is efficient. They're set up and they go out 2 by 2, right? 10 pallets go out, each has an individual parachute on them. At that point, they are at the mercy of nature, gravity, wind, right? All of those things.
Sure.
And those things are just falling. They may fall on top of a building. They may fall on top of a car. Listen, they're going to try and put them in places where people aren't. But here's the problem. And when people see them coming down, they run towards them. Now, what you have just done is you have put one of the most valuable things in Gaza out into the masses, right? So you've got 38,000 meals being dropped into a place where food is at a premium. So who is going to take control of that? The people with guns. That's who's going to take control of that. It's not going to be, unless they're there first and they're there before the people with guns get there, the average person is not going to see very many of those 38,000 meals. Those meals are probably, and I have not seen a single bit of coverage since the airdrop. Not a minute. So got dropped. I would bet a dime on a dollar that most of that, a good portion of those meals, were taken control of by Hamas, by the Palestinian government, which is a terrorist organization, and they're being controlled, and it's not getting to the people who need it. So this humanitarian aid operation, it was not very humanitarian. It is now leverage, and it is being used by the Palestinian government, which is Hamas, for their own benefit and not for the benefit of the people. I can promise you that. And if you need an example, a historic example, people love movies. Okay, go back and watch, because this happened. This is a true story. Go back and watch the opening, maybe 15 minutes of Black Hawk Down. Right?
Oh, okay.
There's a great scene where there is a UN food convoy, bags of rice, big trucks pull up. Crowds of Somalis who are starving rush the trucks. Big bags of rice are being dumped over the side. People are fighting over it. And soldiers, loose term, from Muhammad Fatah Aidid's militia came up, started killing people, and took control of the rice and used it for their own well-being and to control the people, right? They probably doled out some of that rice, but it was to control the people. Which I guarantee is the same thing that's going on in Palestine right now, in Gaza. I won't say Palestine because Palestine's not a place. In Gaza. So this brilliant idea by the United States government to aid the people in Gaza with food was a horrible, horrible idea.
So talk to me about the chain of command on that. Like, does that come straight from... I laugh when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Does that come straight from the president? Like, who's the, who had this brainstorm that this would be a great idea?
So what you probably got was the president saying, hey, this is the whole thing going on in Israel and Gaza is bad. It's a bad look. We need to do something, but we have to do something that's not too pro-Israel and not too pro, Hamas Palestine. So let's do something, in the middle, right? And so the National Security Council and a bunch of his military advisors, the chairman and all the chiefs of staff will get together and they'll put their heads together and they'll come up with, and he'll put out more guidance than that, but they'll probably come up with 6 or 7 or 8 different ideas with varying degrees of detail and say, hey, sir, here's what we think the best options are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many they want to give him. And this was probably pretty high on the list because it's a low impact operation. 1 airplane, 2 airplanes, couple of air crews, chances of, anybody getting injured with an American flag patch on them is about 0. So 0 threat to that. And on the headline, humanitarian aid mission, it all looks great. Right.
Right.
So this is, is probably the easiest. It was the easy button answer, both in the because they will evaluate the media impact of it. They'll impact the effectiveness of the operation. They'll evaluate all of those things, and then they'll come to the boss and say, hey, sir, this is what we think we should do. We gave you a bunch of options, but we think this one's the best one. And I've been in enough of those briefings, not at the presidential level, but at pretty high levels, where they will absolutely sell the plan that they want to go with. Right. So DOD, and in this case, there's probably some crossover between Department of Defense, Department of State, some other folks involved. But they will sell it to the president as this is the one that we want you to go with this. You know what I mean? Without saying
yes.
they will say it. And so they'll, there's a lot of different techniques to do it, and I've seen a bunch of them, but they will sell the one that they want to do. So whether this was the president banging on the table and saying, do that, or it was DOD and DOS saying, this is the one we want to do, somebody at pretty high level sold this and blessed off on it. But I guarantee you the whole thing was generated from the White House staff, maybe not necessarily the president himself, but the chief, probably the press, secretary, that whole, that whole, his advisory group, all those people were probably weighing in that we need to do something,
right.
To downplay the effect of, U.S. involvement in Israel, Gaza.
So what's so gross to me about this and so many things that our government does and has done is the fact that, we say a lot of things about government and how it's run and the people that run it. But the one thing that they're not is stupid. They're not stupid. There was never a point where there wasn't a conversation or a knowledge or understanding of what could happen or what was likely to happen. And they went with, well, let's do optics. That's more important. Let's use words like humanitarian aid, because that's what people will key. That's what everybody will key on. Oh, humanitarian aid. It'll appease this group, but it won't get that group angry. It was never about the people on the ground who are starving, who are dying, who are suffering. It was never about them at all. They don't care. And that's the part to me that is so overwhelmingly gross. Like, I could come up with plenty of more words for it, but that's the one I'm going with right now. It's just gross to me that they know exactly what's going to happen. And they're like, that's okay. It's an ugly world, man.
No, it's a lot of this is about risk. A lot of it is about, how deeply the U.S. wants to get involved, what kind of assets we would put on the ground or willing to put on the ground. Listen, a much more effective way to do the same operation would be to put together a convoy, a UN convoy or a U.S. flagged convoy, for crying out loud, and drive them from Israel into the occupied territories and set up food distribution points with U.S. uniformed soldiers, right? Then you stand there and you hand these meals, you feed these people, literally feed these people and make sure that the people who need the food are getting the food and it's not being used as a weapon, or it's not being used to control the people, or it's not being misused or given to people who shouldn't have it, right? But there's a lot more risk involved in that. Right.
Sure.
You put, platoon, 30, 40 kids out there. I shouldn't say kids because, well, they would be younger than me. So yes, kids, but you put 40 kids out there.
Anybody younger than us is a kid.
Yeah. And they're manning a food distribution point, and, God forbid a suicide vest or something like that happens. Now you've got, the Kabul evacuation all over again. And then it looks bad. So you're right. Success of this mission was not the priority.
Right.
Because if it really was about feeding people, you could do it in a lot better ways, the actual feeding. This was about optics. It was about doing something to appease the masses. It was about headlines, you know, and those kinds of things. It just made somebody feel good about what we were trying to do, and it looked better. But I can promise you, those 38,000 meals did not get to 38,000 hungry bellies, guaranteed.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, and they're obviously, you know, trying to walk this tightrope of, you know, because as is obvious, as we all know, the division now in our government, in the Liberal Party, or in the Democrat Party, liberal, they're divided now. You know, they're fighting it. It's Israel versus Hamas. It's one side feeling this way, and this has caused the biggest rift, I think, that we've seen, certainly. And it's funny because we were just talking recently about, the squad and how there's so much unity in their party versus the Republican Party. And, this is a big divisive topic for the world, really, but definitely in the country. You see it, of course, in our government right now. In the Democratic Party, they're struggling. They don't really know what to do with this. You see it, of course, as we talked about earlier before we came on air, Hollywood, they're divided. Whereas they used to do I mocked them just recently doing one of those black and white videos of how when they do their big videos of gaining support for something that's really just them trying to look really important. But yeah, it's very interesting to watch.
Yeah, you said it. We were talking about before we started recording, Israel, Gaza, everything that's happened, since October 7th, has really made it okay for people to take a position that they believe in, which is great to see. But especially in the entertainment world and in government, you're starting to see people take a position that doesn't necessarily follow along with whatever their party is or whatever their friends are, right? You mentioned Hollywood. Right. There's a massive population, Jewish population in Hollywood, has been for decades, right? That's not a secret. Right. And what you're starting to see is rifts in Hollywood, between those that are pro-Israel, and then you've got the anti-Semitic sentiments are starting to come out. Right. And you're starting to see divisions even within the entertainment industry based on this, which you never saw before, right? Right. Hollywood was
you did not.
Gets, right? As blue gets. They all agreed with everything that was coming out of Washington, D.C. if there was a Democrat in office. But now, not so much. And now you're starting to see that bleed into other topics. We talked about the drugs in Oregon. You're starting to see that. You're starting to see some backlash, especially in and around L.A. and Hollywood, about the homelessness, right? That Hollywood is no longer okay with because it's gotten out of control. You've got homelessness in Florida, same thing, right? You're starting to see, it's really funny, the older Saturday Night Live guys like Dana Carvey and
yes,
Bob, what's his name? Anyway, that whole crew, those guys are, it's funny, they're a bunch of crabby old men now because they're all turning conservative. And they're not buying off on any of this stuff. But really I believe that this issue specifically, Israel, Gaza, has been great for people to take a position and disagree with each other publicly in forums and between people that wouldn't have disagreed on a single thing, 8 months ago. Wouldn't have happened.
Right.
But now it's okay, which is good. That is a good thing for all of us.
Yes. Yeah, because they're not just in lockstep, just repeating in their echo chambers, repeating all the same things because they don't really care. Now suddenly this is something they care about, and they're speaking up, and it's very interesting to watch. It is surprising to see. I don't know if I ever would have been able to peg the thing that would, shake some people out of their stupor or stupidity, whatever the case might be, and really stand for something of consequence and significance. And here we are, it's happening. And you're seeing some, we mentioned within the Democratic Party. I was just watching a video earlier today of AOC getting chased down by the same people that she calls her own, basically, and calling her out for her stance and not, doing what they wanted her to do. And so she had made a statement or a tweet or something about, how glorifying protesters, how it's supposed to make people feel uncomfortable. It's good. And she likes it. Well, she got protested and she didn't like it at all. She dropped a big old F-bomb at them, and she was mad. She was, as the kids say, she was big mad. Yeah. So that came back and bit her on the tush. And it's interesting. It's just interesting. And I don't necessarily agree with everything or half of everything, but it's interesting. Like you said, it's interesting to see people speaking out and having those conversations, and they're tough conversations, because when you find out that somebody that you're very close to or you think you're close to has a entirely different perspective on such a big topic, it's pretty wild to watch, for sure.